And now it's my great pleasure to introduce on stage here in Denmark at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit 2025, the Croatian Prime Minister Andrej Plenković. He will address the topical question of Europe's defense of Ukraine. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be in Copenhagen at the Democracy Summit. I would like to thank former Prime Minister and the Chairman and the co-founder of the Alliance for Democracies for having invited me here to be with you today. It is an interesting morning. You heard first the speech of Andrej, then Andrej, and now Andrej. So I've never been to a summit with such a similarity of our names of the same Greek origin, Andreas. Today's topic is, of course, Ukraine, its defense, and the context of Russia's aggression. Here I will speak to you on behalf of Croatia, which unfortunately had a similar but not the same experience of having been the victim of aggression. It was the greater Serbian policy of Milosevic's regime in the beginning of the 90s. And therefore, we do have some substantive and I would say knowledge that is not really common to the current leaders in Europe, because very few countries have undergone a similar situation that Ukraine is going through over the past 3 years. First of all, I would like to express our respect and our support for Ukraine, to President Zelensky and his team and the entire Ukrainian people for not only defending their homeland, but also for defending the main values that the Europe is based on, that the entire democratic world is based on, and that is the freedom, the respect for territorial integrity, good neighborly relations, and everything that we were trying to build since the Second World War until today. What is at stake with Russia's aggression that now goes on for more than 3 years is the international order. The international order based on international law, based on multilateralism, and based on mutual respect. The pattern of Russia's behavior towards Ukraine was exactly the same that we have felt in Croatia. I will explain it in 4 points which will immediately ring a bell with all of you who are observing this situation. First, there is the context of questioning the identity of a nation, linked with the necessary denazification. Then the second point which comes into question is the endangered minority, whether it's the Russians in Ukraine or at the time Serbs in Croatia. Then this minority starts proclaiming independence on the territory of a country where they live. And then as the fourth element, the neighboring liberators come. It's all the same. When I remember the Minsk agreement in 2014, it was, if you would move away the toponyms, it could have been implemented also in our country 30 years ago. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because what is at stake in Ukraine is the future of potential negative consequences of precedent if the aggressor is awarded with somebody else's territory. That would give a green light to any bully around the world to look around his borders and see if there is someone weaker that can be pressed and shoveled and basically ending up with the taking away of the territory. Therefore, the support of Europe, the support of international community to Ukraine must continue. I think we have seen an unprecedented mobilization of the international community in assisting Ukraine politically, economically, financially, and militarily. We have done our substantive contribution ourselves, and we shall continue to do so, because that is the only right thing to do. The stake of credibility of the European Union, the stake of credibility of NATO are currently being observed and debated. And therefore, I look forward for the preparations of the NATO summit in The Hague with new ambitions, when it comes to the defense expenditure, with new modernization ambitions, with new deterrence ambitions, and with new support scheme for Ukraine, from security guarantees to maintaining peace. These are the key issues which are in front of us. The European Union will continue to support both militarily, depending on the contribution of each and every member state, but most importantly, financially and economically, to keep the country running. Croatia stands by Ukraine for the last 3.5 years and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your speak.
Thank you.
And we go to our little podium. So it's an exciting week for security as well. What do you expect? What we see as results by the end of the week after the potential meeting in Istanbul?
Well, first, we hope it takes place in the full composition. That would be an incredible step forward so far. I think that, as we heard from Andrej, but also from the statements of President Zelensky, that he is willing to come and to negotiate genuinely. The announcement also by President Trump of his readiness is an important signal. And now we need to see if Russia is really ready to negotiate seriously, because so far we have seen the continuation of aggression on the front line, and we have seen little credible signals that they're really willing to negotiate seriously. Of course, unless all the conditions that they are laying in front of Ukraine are fulfilled, and that is not a fantastic scenario.
What do you think the Europeans should do with regard to the uncertainty when it comes to the Washington, D.C. position on what is happening? Do you think Europe should still stay as close as possible to the US administration, or sort of think about some own initiatives?
Well, first of all, the way I see it is that President Trump is a peace president. He's not a wartime president.
A deal president also.
A deal president, but bearing in mind that we can now clearly detect that he did not identify neither with the first Russian aggression against Ukraine 11 years ago. He attributes it to, at the time, Obama administration. The second one to Biden administration, basically signaling the weaknesses of those two administrations for having allowed that Russia actually attacks Ukraine and first takes Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, and now Zaporozhye and Kherson. I think this is critically for us to understand. The issue of identification with the situation is extremely important in understanding the attempts of the US administration first to reach a deal, which was recently ratified by Verkhovna Rada when it comes to the minerals. And second is the diplomatic engagement which is there. In my feeling is that from the American perspective, the deal is more important in terms of speed, and that means no more people being killed and no more Ukrainian infrastructure or civilian objects being destroyed, rather than the end result of a potential peace plan. When it comes to the European Union, I think we have, depending on, of course, capabilities of each and every member state, given incredible contribution to support Ukraine. You could see how Andrej was grateful to Denmark. We are not as financially and economically well off as Denmark, but from our point of view, we have given them also an incredible amount of support. I here particularly refer to military support, and I think everybody has done that. What we need to bear in mind from the European perspective is really how will the end game or the end peace look like, because if, as I said in my introductory remarks, if it is going to be sanctioning in positive terms the aggressor and leaving the Ukrainian territories, and maybe even in an unfortunate scenario, recognizing them by someone from, let's say, the Western world, that is not a scenario that we could support. We will never recognize anything in any event, unless Ukraine does it itself.
I think it's clear how much President Trump wants a peace deal, but I think it's very unclear how much he's focused on stability of that peace deal, or if there is a security guarantee that the world can offer Ukraine afterwards. Isn't that the biggest risk, that the pressure for a deal from Washington, D.C. is so high, but the idea of what's coming afterwards maybe not fully elaborated?
Well, the security guarantees are the key question. You could hear again today that the only real security guarantee that Ukraine sees is a full membership in NATO. At the same time, we all understand that this is not an option which is on the table today in terms of support by all the allies that Ukraine joins NATO tomorrow. So everything between being a non-member of NATO and being a member of NATO is where the middle ground for finding a solution of security guarantees will be. And in that respect, in my view, the American approach is logical because they want a quick solution. Now it's already 4 months that president has been in office, and there was no quick deal because it was impossible. Everybody knew there was not going to be such a quick deal. But when you look at this situation from Ukraine's perspective, a country that got rid of its own nuclear arsenal 30 years ago, they are, if you talk to many of the interlocutors in the Ukrainian political circles, they are skeptical because they feel, look, we agreed to give it away 30 years ago, and what happened to us 20 years later and 30 years later. So they will require more substantive security guarantees so as that the aggression that they have undergone in 2014 and 2022 does not repeat itself in, let's say, 5 years period from today.
Before we go into detail what the security guarantees might be, I also would like to invite you to send questions on my iPad through your iPhone, and maybe we have time to include one or two in our debate. Security guarantees, we are already discussing the opportunity or the possibility of also sending European troops, possibly. What's your point on that?
Well, there is an ongoing process of a dialogue within the coalition of the willing. Some countries are more inclined to send troops, some have reservations. For instance, in Croatia, it is due to the position of different political actors, it is not an option for us to participate on the ground. But we are part of the coalition of the willing, and we will continue support with military support Ukraine. I think they have built up a formidable armed forces which are perhaps the most numerous and the most equipped now when we look at the entire aid packages which were given, and also forged in combat, which is not a common situation anymore. And therefore, the security guarantees will come from the, let's say, a peacekeeping force that would be close to the demarcation line, or the forces which may be a little bit more in the western side of Ukraine, with specific situation which needs to be defined. What would be the role of the US armed forces, what is the backstop in a sense, what they can support and how they can help those who would be on the ground. But I think the main objective is how to strengthen the Ukrainian military so as to be able to defend its country from potential other or further Russian aggression.
How ready to act you feel Europe is in that regard? We have almost 27 opinions on what is best, and certainly a few, talking about Orban, that are very different to many others. What needs to be done to make Europe maybe a stronger negotiator in that regard, or a more unique voice?
Yes. Well, in practice, we have almost got used to finding a decision-making process which is 27 minus 1, i.e. 26, and Hungary having a different view by publicly declaring they believe that they have a different strategy vis-à-vis Russia and Ukraine. They are the only ones so clearly saying that this war is not their war and has nothing to do with them. But it has to do with all of us. I've been Prime Minister now for 9 years in my third mandate, and if someone tells me that Russia's aggression against Ukraine doesn't have anything to do with us, it's simply not true. We were all faced with a spike in the energy prices, the prices of gas, in turn increased prices of electricity, of oil derivatives. We had to all put in place a series of emergency measures to help our citizens, to help businesses, to keep the institutions running, to maintain the social cohesion in our society by creating safety nets. So let's say I come from the European People's Party, and our political philosophy is the responsibility of an individual, freedom of entrepreneur, social market economy, and as less as possible state involvement. I have turned out to be the creator of safety nets and sort of state interventionists for the last 5 years, something we never wrote in our programs, so never imagined that we would be doing, but we had to do it because we demonstrated the role of the state in the crisis where we were not the ones who were responsible for it, and all of it coming immediately after the COVID-19 crisis. So in a way, that type of rhetoric, it has nothing to do with us, does not fly. I think it has to do with us. And therefore, we have been committed the amount of financial support and economic support to Ukraine that the European Union has put in place, even with the revision of the multi-annual financial framework last year, is incredible. There was never even a remotely similar experience that we have done so far. So I think we are standing with Ukraine all the time, all of us except maybe 1 or 1.5 member states.
Last week, Chancellor Merz started his term in my hometown of Berlin, and he emphasized strongly to strengthen Europe, to reunite also the Weimar Triangle. He did his first trips to Paris and to Poland. Are you optimistic about that approach, or do you think, oh no, now it's the French and the Germans, you know, kind of starting to create their own Europe again?
Well, on the contrary, I think that we witnessed in Europe an unprecedented situation of, let's say, 5-6 months ago, where the French government does not enjoy support of majority in the Assemblée Nationale, and we had a no confidence situation after the problems in the coalition in Germany. So we had like the Franco-German engine en panne, if I may say, one in the midst of the early elections, which is also in the history of German politics really a rare occasion, and France that can live perhaps in a few months again the dissolution of the Assemblée Nationale or something like that. So when you have these elements which are not really the building blocks but relatively injured knees in football terms, then your action in terms of global posture is not as strong as it is once the engine is functioning. So the first statement by President Macron and Chancellor Merz is, I think, very positive. I have met him at several occasions and supported his election. I think he's a very good news for Europe. He's good news for Germany. I think he comes at the right stage of his political and his business career. So he has a period of time ahead of him to demonstrate this new willingness, and I think that he will embolden Germany's foreign policy the way I see him today, whether it's together with France or within the EU or within NATO or in the Weimar Circle or with other partnerships. I think he will make a very good role for Germany and for Europe in the years to come.
There's also the question of EU enlargement, also in the West Balkans, where you're almost directly, you have a very direct opinion on that. Are you hopeful that the path will continue under the European and also under the current national leaderships?
Well, I think that the enlargement is very important for the European Union, for the region where Croatia is, that is the Southeast Europe, or whether it's for Ukraine, Moldova. Georgia is now more or less on a self-put pause. But we are a strong supporter of enlargement, provided that all the countries who are willing to join the EU fulfill the criteria. What I sense this time, because Croatia is the latest member of the European Union, we joined on the 1st of July 2013, that means that there were 2 mandates of the European Parliament and 2 mandates of the Commission without any enlargement being materialized. This time I sense even that the mission letter that was sent by Ursula von der Leyen to Slovenian Commissioner Kos is more ambitious, that the Commission will try to create a conducive environment that at least one of the countries who is willing to joins by the end of this Commission and this European Parliament. This is not a simple task. We are particularly interested for progress of Bosnia and Herzegovina because they are the country that we share borders at the north of the country, at the west of the country, at the south of the country. Croats are one of the constituent peoples and we want them to be equal, so we want to take Bosnia and Herzegovina by the arm and bring it closer to the EU, because only the European path will ensure its good functioning. But for that, we need good willingness also of the political forces within the country. And others are also ambitious, all in different stages, but in my view, it seems to be that now we have a more serious chance. The main issue, of course, at the European level will be the Copenhagen criteria and the forgotten fourth criteria, which is the absorption capacity, especially with the new countries because of the decision-making, budgetary implications, and the policy implications. And here, something which is not said very often, but the key issue is the membership of Ukraine, because once Ukraine joins, many of the current net beneficiaries of the EU budget will overnight become net contributors. And this is going to be a big political issue in the years to come. While we support Ukraine, I'm not saying that we don't.
One very short answer I would like to ask you for from the audience is about Ukraine. There were several questions about Ukraine, and one is, how can we create a greater coalition of the paying? Croatia is contributing a lot, but others don't. If you have an opportunity for a short answer on that question, would be lovely.
I think that, as I said, most of the European Union members and other countries in Europe who are not members are supporting Ukraine. They are very active. Some of them want to do it in a more military contribution, others in more providing of assistance by equipment or political and diplomatic activities. But my feeling is that we've never witnessed such a unity and such an extent of solidarity to any country in a similar situation as Ukraine enjoys, and I think rightly so. And we shall continue to do that together.
And we are hopeful that this week will bring some success or some progress. Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, thank you so much for being on stage.